Once again, let's give it a few minutes to see who jumps on to say hello. As always, before we get started on our main topics. So let's see who jumps on. And we're here once again to chat about Freemasonry. Today we're going to talk about Freemasonry and Naval Freemasonry in particular, or Freemasonry on the water, or maritime Freemasonry. Pick your terms. You know, Freemasonry, depending how you want to define it, started in England, and a big part of that is England is in and of itself a seafaring country, a seafaring nation. And so it does not surprise me that you're going to see some connections between Freemasonry and, naval ships, the Navy, Freemasonry on the water, things like that. Also, Freemasonry did expand a lot of times with military encampments, military uh, British military forts and military expansion, which also was oftentimes on the backs of the Navy, right? The Navy had to get the Army to where it needed to go. So we're going to talk about that, but for the first little bit, let's give a few minutes. Let's see who joins. And as always, what do you want to talk about when it comes to Freemasonry? Any of your thoughts, positive, negative, or neutral? I'd love to hear them as we wait for people to jump on and say hello. The first hour, I usually wait to see who wants to jump on, who wants to talk, and what they want to talk about. And then the second hour is usually when I talk about specific topics, such as today's, Freemasonry and the Navy, or maritime Freemasonry. Pick your terms. But for the first little bit, let's wait to see who jumps on and who says hello. Yesterday we were talking about the we'll talk about some of the things we have coming up and what's going on, but let's give it a bit of time. First, let's wait. Let's see who wants to chat and wants to say hello. Hello, Ryan. How's it going? I hope you're doing well. Good to see you again. How is the day treating you so far? I know it's still early, and don't forget to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button if you are just joining us. That is good. I'm doing well also. Still waiting for this heat wave to die off. I think we're all suffering from being way, way, way too warm. So I could go for some cooler weather. Yeah, you told me that, which is really cool. I'm surprised more cruise ships don't do that. I mean, there are Masonic cruises, right, in 2025. Right, this was in April, the Masonic cruise joined brethren, friends, and family for 4 days aboard P&O's beautiful Iona sailing to Bruges, Brugges, and Le Havre. So, yeah, but that was April 1st to April 5th. Setting sail on April Fool's Day seems like you're taking quite a big risk to me. That's a whole other story. And after this is done, I will be putting a bunch of questions up and poll questions up on my YouTube, so make sure you check those out as well. But first, like I said, the first hour or so, I really just hang out and chat, and then the second hour in is where I'll talk about specific topics related to, specific topics, in this case, Freemasonry and the Navy, or being in the Navy. There are some lodges that are built upon or surrounded by, the Navy, like Navy Lodge number 2612. They were built off of, or the membership was primarily naval officers. So yeah, it's really cool. So we'll talk about that. I have no idea. I don't even know if that's Masonic or not. I never bothered to check and ask. Where does the term Mason jar come from? Oh, it comes from the inventor, John Landis Mason, an American tinsmith who patented the jar in 1858. So it was named after, I never even thought if that was Masonic or not. It's not. So there is that. Now, in fairness, that's according to Google AI, and with AI, you always want to be careful, but I'm willing to bet it was the case. Oh, I think I saw that. Let me just double check quickly. The Grand East Monthly Newsletter. Free coffee's the best. I 100% support free coffee. I mean, I'll support anything that's free, but especially free coffee. I'm not going to complain much about that. Let's see. It's not letting me download it right now for some reason. There it is. Trying to find out the number of parades. Welcome, you're just joining us. Let's chat about Freemasonry. I should put that in here at some point. Give me 1 second. Gosh darn it. For some reason, it's proving difficult here. So thank you, by the way, Dad, for sending me this. The months of July and August have been busy and fulfilling time for myself and the Grand Line officers. We've been actively representing our Grand Lodge by attending annual communications and participating in various community events, including street parades alongside representatives from across the entire Masonic family. This is a vital aspect of our responsibilities as Grand Master and Grand Line officers. Through our presence at these events, we aim to raise awareness, enhance visibility, and reaffirm that Freemasonry remains active and engaged here in Manitoba. It is important that the public sees the Grand Lodge of Manitoba as a continuing force for good, committed to serving our community. I'd like to share with you some key points from a recent committee report presented at the Grand Lodge of British Columbia and Yukon's annual communication Report on the future of Freemasonry in BC. More men today say they would become Freemasons if they knew it existed, authorized by Worshipful Brother Bill Bishop. Where's the list of actual parades? Pioneer Day in Steinbach. Austin Threshman's Reunion Parade, Ukrainian Street Parade, Dauphin, Manitoba. A request for volunteer drivers once again. We should do Mardi Gras. I bet you they do have Freemasons in Mardi Gras. I mean, Freemasonry exists in New Orleans. Ola, Mr. Keeps on Ticking. How is it going for you? I hope that you are doing well as always. Well, let's see Freemasons in Mardi Gras. I bet you there has been some. As always, right now we're just hanging out. This first hour is just us talking, chatting about whatever it is, before we get into the main topic. Once again, will be Freemasonry and the Navy. Freemasonry in Mardi Gras. Well, sometimes that happens. I can't always promise you'll get to every message. So there was a Freemasons float at the Mardi Gras Parade in July 25th, 1993, at least. I don't know. I have a picture of it here somewhere. Oh, that's more like a shrine float almost, which is Masonic, right? Shrine and Masonic are... Every Shriner is a Mason. Interesting. That's a good rabbit hole to go through. There's nothing wrong with that. Oh, Cold is back, but then he was here for just 1 second. He said, F the satanic Freemasons. And then something else, which I'm not going to say. Cold, if you don't want to, if you want to jump on the actual chat and say hello, you're more than welcome. You just can't be swearing, etc., because YouTube will ban your, or will hide your comment. Who said that again? That was, who said time flies like an arrow, fruit flies like a banana? That was a quote from, I can't think of the name of it now, but it was on one of my favorite TV shows, Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip, which I loved. Marx? I think it was Groucho Marx, right? Who said that? Wyatt, by the way, please hit the like and subscribe button. Holy cow. See, I don't know if I'd have $600 to spend on a 4K Blu-ray player. That's expensive, but it might be worth it. I mean, physical media, like I said, doesn't get the love it deserves. And I think supporting physical media, we have a better shot at supporting movie-making industry than you do having a... through streaming. So Wyatt, though, let me know how it's going and let me know what it is that you're going to talk about. Do you have any questions or comments or thoughts on Freemasonry? Positive, negative, or neutral? I'd love to hear it. And once again, you can't see him, but Cold. You're welcome to jump in the chat and say things. You just got to keep in mind, YouTube moderates things to avoid the swearing and such. I do not know, Wyatt Derp. What do you call a 9-legged spider? Because it better be a Masonic joke of some sort. I promise I won't. I mean, we're going to get into the Navy and Freemasonry eventually. Like I said, the first hour, I try to wait to see who's going to join the chat before I do anything else. All is well by me, raised eyebrow. I hope all is well with you also. Let me know how your day is going. How your weekend, I guess I was going to say weekend, but it's Tuesday. Not quite the weekend yet. How your day is going. If you're surviving this crazy heat, I don't know what it's like for your neck of the woods, but it is way too hot here in Windsor. I cannot wait to get some cooler temperatures once again, that's for sure. Okay, so yes, so that's right, in New York. I should remember that because of Angry Allen. Yeah, so we're all suffering then together. Fingers crossed, the heat goes away soon because I am not enjoying it myself. Well, I mean, you still haven't answered the question yet, Wyatt Derp. What do you call a nine-legged spider? Having said that, what about Freemasonry creeps you out? I hope that I'm not a creepy person myself. At least I try not to be. But what is it about Freemasonry that you would say creeps you out? Because you're not alone. A lot of people have that feeling and that idea. I'd love to know why. I do, but it doesn't really work well. The air conditioning in my place sucks. They keep meaning to get it fixed every year, and every year I don't, and then it's a whole thing. So my AC is definitely not great, though. Okay, so when you say culty, what is it that you would define as, and I'm asking, like, seriously, Wyatt, what is it, like, how would you define culty, or just the cult, like a cult? What do you think are some of the things that makes a cult a cult? Because I can talk to you about some of the actual, like, official definitions. Um, Right, and I can talk to you about why I don't view it as a cult, but I want to get your definition first, just so I kind of understand, because there's cult, there's occult, right? There's different kind of terms and ideas related here, so. So it is that, for the record, right? Freemasonry is a bunch of people getting together in a club. Um, and so, I mean, if that was the definition of cult, then I guess it would kind of qualify. So I've been in Freemason since 2007, so about 20 years. For me, what would make a cult, there are three categories. First, there is unquestioning or unflinching kind of loyalty to a single either person or a single set of ideas that are interpreted, forgive the sound outside, interpreted through a person, right? So it's either I am the leader, I am in charge, you do what I say, or we have this set of ideas and I'm responsible for implementing them, so you have to do what I say, right? An inability to leave is another element of a cult, and the desire to separate the membership from the world at large. That is, I think, the third kind of way I would define a cult. And so Freemasonry does not have those things, nor, interesting enough, does it have a shared belief system. It has shared rituals, but rituals and belief systems are not the same thing, right? So Freemasonry is democratic, which means every year there is a set of votes as to who gets to run the show, who gets to be a leader, either at the lodge level or at the district level. And you have a 1-year term, right? So there is no, like, I'm the worshipful master of my lodge. I am year limited, and the amount of power I have is, limited by democracy. So even if I want the lodge to do something, if the lodge votes against it, then I have no ability to enforce said control, right? Freemasonry does not try to separate people from the outside world. And unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you want to define it, it's very easy for people to just leave Freemasonry. People do it every day. You're not called out on it or forced to stay. You're allowed to stay or go as you so desire. And so that, I think, also separates it from the idea of a cult, right? Because again, a cult is one in which you're basically not able to leave, or there's some type of penalty for leaving. Almost similar to like a gang in some ways. Well, I mean, I would say, I understand what you're trying to say, Wyatt Derp. By the way, if you're not done so, Wyatt, I hope you hit the like button and the subscribe button. But I would say, I would define cults as being bad just because, for me, whether the aims of the cult are good or not good, if they are pursuing those aims, again, through undemocratic means, or through not letting people leave who want to leave, or through some type of unquestioned loyalty to a single authority or idea, then I think it's a bad thing. Even if the purposes are good, it's not always about the aim. It's about how you achieve that aim. That matters too. Having said all of that, what I would point out also is, the word cult comes from the word occult. Occult means hidden, right? It's Latin meaning hidden. Right, and I think it's important to keep in mind, not everything hidden is bad, right? Many things are kept private or kept hidden for a variety of reasons. Sometimes it's monetary. Sometimes it's out of desire to maintain bonds of affection, fraternal affection between different people. Sometimes it's about family. Sometimes it's for security purposes. So I would say cults, the way I define it, are always bad. But things being hidden are not necessarily good or bad. Yeah. But I think the reason, like a group won't necessarily, again, have unquestioned or unflinching loyalty to a particular group or particular idea, particular person, right? And you can leave a group if you so desire. Cults, there's this implication that you're not able to leave without some type of penalty. It's almost the same way, gang has a negative connotation, club has a positive connotation. It's like, gang and club, you could argue, are the same thing, but there's a difference therein. But Wyatt, I hope that made sense. And like I said, Wyatt, if you're not done so yet, I do hope you'll hit the like and subscribe button. I hope that raised eyebrow things cool off a bit for you. Interestingly enough, I'm talking about Freemasonry and the maritime, Freemasonry and the Navy, and New York at Port City, a town, a port town, I think famously, kind of grew on the backs of its ports. Immigrants coming in on boats. So there may be some connections there between Freemasonry in New York and Freemasonry and the water, Freemasonry and the Maritimes. Hello, E.A. Mason. How's it going? I hope that you are doing well, as always. I should take a moment, and Wyatt Derp, I'll mention this to you as well. Please, if you get the chance, take a moment to mark your calendars. This weekend, August 16th, from 12 p.m. to 2 p.m., I'll be live streaming from the Windsor Hip Hop Festival at Atkinson Park. That's going to be a blast. On August 20th, from 3 to 6, I'll be live streaming on Instagram, going to try something new, and then from starting August 21st, I'll be doing a 24-hour live stream starting August 21st at 2 p.m., going to August 22nd at 2 p.m. So that should be an absolute blast as well. And I'm very, very much looking forward to it. Welcome. If you're just joining us, jump in the chat. Please say hello. Welcome back, Mr. Keeps. Once again, I, as always, hope that you are doing well. I've got your item mailed out today, so you should get it soon. Or your items, I should say. But thank you, everybody, for being here. And then on August 29th, I've got a live stream on my personal channel with Smokey the Clown, who is a common joiner here on the stream. He got his about a week ago, Dad. I really wanted to make it down. Sadly, I could not. I was very disappointed, but he got his a week ago, approximately. And he went to his first EA meeting, or first meeting, I should say, that they opened on the first degree. It was cool, and it was proud also. You have a stadium meeting tonight? I thought you went to a meeting before, Courtney. That's awesome. Let me know how it goes. Like I said, it was too bad I couldn't make it to your EA, but my goal is to try my best to make it to your your Master Mason. I don't know for sure if I can. I'd hope to keep it a secret from you, but I figured, you know what, I've talked about it enough on this stream. Cam, what do you think prevents you from considering Catholicism or Christianity as a whole? That's an interesting question. I mean, I'm Anglican by birth, right? I remember going to church as a child, really, really young. And I've been to churches a few times since, like Anglican churches here in Windsor. Okay, nice. Mountain Lodge number 661. When you say, why is it that I've decided that I don't believe that like Catholicism or Christianity or any religion is correct? I mean, I suppose it's the supernatural elements of it. You know, I can believe in things on a metaphorical context, right? This is something Jordan Peterson, who I'm not a big fan of by any means, but he kind of jumps back and forth between, like, I can understand the metaphorical significance or importance of, for example, the Garden of Eden and fall from grace and things of that nature, but literally the idea that, you know, all of humanity evolved from two people, there's a lot of biological issues with that, right? You know, you would see some very significant bottlenecks, and, you know, a virgin birth, things of that nature, bringing things back from the dead, right? Those are just things that I can understand they might have metaphorical value, but practically speaking, I just don't see how. I can't believe, for example, that the entire earth flooded, or you know, someone could be risen from the dead, or things of that nature. So it's on the kind of the scientific reason grounds. Having said that, that's my own personal opinion. As I've said many times, I know many Freemasons who are Christians. I know within that collection some who are Catholics, and they're all great people, and they all seem to have and use their faith as a way to guide themselves in a moral way. So yeah, whatever makes you kind of whatever kind of works for you and brings you peace and comfort, I'm a supporter of. And for me personally, like I said, I believe in a supreme being. So I guess I'd be described as a theist or a deist, right? I believe in a supreme being. I believe the supreme being would prefer us to live virtuous lives and organize and set the world up in such a way that we are more likely to find success, define as you will, if we exist in a virtuous way. But I do not believe that, I do not believe in the miracle, supernatural components of religions, of any religion. But again, I like the metaphors of it. One of my favorite religious metaphorical ideas is from Judaism. It's tikkun olam, if I recall correctly. The idea that, that God divided or broke the world apart into many pieces, and then it's the job of humans to put the world back together again, or to reconnect all of the different pieces together. And pursuant to one of my favorite movies, maybe we are the pieces. But yeah, tikkun olam, I think, was the Jewish idea that I really like. And there were certain ideas I also like in the Muslim faith, right? Where one of the ideas is the idea of not, I don't believe in violence to enforce it as some radicals do, not the typical Muslim, but some radical Muslims. But I like the idea of not being allowed to, not being allowed to draw or represent their God, lest the drawing become the source of worship and not the idea or the God itself or the being itself, which I think is actually a really clever idea. I think one of the biggest challenges that many religions face is idolatry, the idea that we will worship the symbol and not the actual force or meaning behind the symbol. And it seems like the Muslim faith tried to create a rule that would avoid that issue of idolatry, right? Because to my understanding, you're not actually worshiping, quote unquote, the cross. You're worshiping the force that was on the cross. But it's very easy to fall into idolatry if you start to worship symbols more than the meaning and the force behind them. Well, I guess so. So going back, my biggest I guess the reason why I can't embrace any religious doctrines fully is because I do not accept supernatural explanations for things, whether it be a virgin birth, Garden of Eden, being raised from the dead, things of that nature, right? But having said that, is completely me personally, and I think that comes from, again, my idea of the Enlightenment, or the fact that I identify so strongly with the Enlightenment philosophy, which is you should focus on reason. It's possible, Ryan. We may get to a point where science is able to actually prove some of these things we see in the Bible. I've heard some religious people try to argue that science, in fact, proves some of these religious ideas. I've always found those explanations kind of wanting myself, but it is possible. We may find, in fact, that there is some scientific proof behind some of these things, but I'm skeptical of that, right? But it's possible. Famously, after the Big Bang Theory first was put forward, who was it? The Pope at the time. I can't think of the Pope's name now. I think it was not not this one, not the one before, but the one before. So two popes ago, gathered all the scientists together, and he said, you know, you can keep studying anything you want that occurred after the Big Bang, but before the Big Bang, you're not allowed to study that scientifically because that's the domain of God. So in some ways, sometimes there's a tendency for religion to try to limit or kneecap scientific inquiry, lest it disprove some, element of church doctrine. Perhaps the most famous example was, Copernicus, and the idea of a heliocentric model, or I think it was Galileo, heliocentric model of the solar system, right? So there can be a time when religion actually tries to limit science. Having said that, Newton was, a firm believer in God. Einstein was a believer in God in the sense of God as being the mathematical equations which govern the universe, which is something I'm a little bit closer to. Maybe Mr. Keeps on Ticking. I can't even think of the term for it now. I used to know it from a scientific perspective. I'm a believer in an infinite universe, and then there are pockets in which Big Bangs take place. So, the universe itself, or the reality itself, is infinite, but within this infinite time and space of reality, there exists different Big Bangs that take place in different pockets therein, right? And ours was one where it just so happened that the Big Bang produced the conditions that were right for life on Earth. There may be some of these pockets where conditions are such that electrons are the size of volleyballs, or gravity is so strong it never really gets off the ground, right? So, well, I think the Big Bang was discovered by it was Hubble, right? So Hubble noticed that the universe was expanding rapidly. Universes were moving apart from one another at an increasing rate. And eventually, it was a French monk. I think it was a monk of some sort, French. I think, I'm looking it up quickly. Now it's bugging me. Belgium. According to Google, it was a Belgian monk by the name of, or Belgian Catholic priest, George Lemaitre, who said, well, if the universes are expanding outward, you can go back in time and imagine time when they were all kind of smushed together. So, welcome, Spirit of Justice. Why is infinity impossible? I've never understood that. I get the whole turtles all the way down thing, but I don't see why infinity is impossible. I mean, within an infinite universe, you can have finite dates. So, you have an infinite reality, but then our Big Bang happened 13.8 billion years ago. My last live stream was about 12 hours ago. You have an infinite reality within which you have finite events happening and taking place. I think we could be a simulation. I don't think it's impossible, Spirit. I don't think it's impossible by any means. However, at a certain point, it stops mattering, right? Or it doesn't matter. If you have a simulation that is so accurate that you cannot tell it apart from reality, then who's to say any one reality is particularly correct, right? That was my biggest complaint. By the way, I will talk about Freemasonry and the Navy at some point. Um, you know, one of my biggest complaints about the movie The Matrix was so Neo finds out, spoilers, Neo finds out he's living in what he assumed to be reality, only to be awoken, pulled out and discover there's actually a separate reality in which the machines won and humans are being used as batteries. But why did we then assume that the second reality is the correct one? It seems like people assume because it's worse, it must be real. How do we know there's not a third reality underpinning the first two, which is actually the true reality? Maybe there's another reality where the aliens came and defeated the robots, and both the robots and humans are stuck in some simulation, and it's just different levels of it therein. But yeah, I don't see why infinity has to be impossible. According to Wikipedia, so in the philosophy of mathematics, the abstraction actual infinity is also called completed infinity. It involves infinite entities as given actual and completed objects. Actual infinity is to be contrasted with potential infinity, in which an endless process, such as add 1 to the previous number, produces a sequence with no last element, and where each individual result is finite and is achieved in a finite number of steps. Let them. AI probably do better than we can, to be honest. The ancient Greek term for the potential improper infinite was apeiron, unlimited or indefinite, in contrast to the actual or proper infinite aphorismenon. Anaximander held that the apeiron was the principal or main element composing all things. Plato's notion was more abstract, having to do with indefinite variability. Only the Pythagoreans place infinite among the objects of sense. They do not regard number as separate from these, and assert that what is outside the heaven is infinite. Plato, on the other hand, holds that there is no body outside, yet that the infinite is present not only in the objects of sense, but in forms also. Well, all right, but infinite regress right. Philosophical concepts to describe a series of entities. Each entity in the series depends on its predecessor following a recursive principle. For example, the epistemic regress is just a series of beliefs in which the justification of each belief depends on the justification of the belief before. An infinite regress argument is an argument against a theory based on the fact that the theory leads to infinite regression. For such an argument to be successful, it must demonstrate not just that the theory in question entails an infinite regress, but also that this regress is vicious or a contradiction. But why would it be a contradiction, or why would it be a metaphysical impossibility? I mean, start counting. Start at 1 and keep counting. You'll never get to the end of it, right? So infinity clearly exists in some way. Auslander Rouse, remigration. I don't know what that means. Hello, Mr. Freemason. I did hear about that. That does concern me a little bit. I'm not a fan of theocracy in government, but again, I speak exclusively for myself. Not for Freemasonry per se, but I hope that Freemasonry can, more than anything, provide some type of reason in a world where it seems like very often the focus is on theology. But yes, I heard about that. I hope that this looks a little bit better. I feel like my last I feel like my stream previously, my camera was a little bit too low. Open eyes. Well, I'm sorry, I can't help you that you owe the cartel 2.5 million. Though hopefully, what you can do is hit the like and subscribe button. It won't help you with your 2.5 million, but it will at least make you feel better. It's coffee. It is coffee. I got your coffee in here, and I got my free coffee this morning as well. Welcome, Lapis. I hope that you're doing well. Actually, I'm going to make that the poll question. There's something Masonic in there. Science is Masonic. Is the infinite possible? Here, we'll put it this way. Is an infinite universe possible? My vote would be yes, for whatever it's worth. Yeah, I heard about that too. It does concern me a little bit. I'd rather we not have any red heifer rituals in our, because doesn't that mean that the world's supposed to end if that happens? What is going on? And open eyes, I hope that you'll hit that like and subscribe button. And let me know if you have any questions or thoughts on Freemasonry, positive, negative, or neutral. I'd love to hear them. Another 15 minutes, we'll start talking about the main subject, which is going to be Freemasonry and the Navy. Latter-day Saints? I did not know that. I like Neil deGrasse Tyson, so I will look it up for sure. I mean, the most recent kind of science book I read all the way through was, do I still have it in here? Give me one sec. God and the Multiverse. Victor J. Stenger. And I also read oh, we got some hearts. I also read Stephen Hawking's book, but I can't think of what it was called now. So maybe he was mortal. I don't know. I mean, like I said, I'm not religious myself per se. Nikal, I do remember you. I hope you're doing well. Thank you so much for being here. I hope that you're having a great, great day. You know, with the 15 minutes to go, let me take a few moments to talk about a few things I want to mention. Hello again, Nikal, or Nikai, I should say, excuse me. I'm going to go through my upcoming events one more time, then we'll start on the main topic. So, and just random announcements. So, August 16th, 12 p.m. to 2 p.m., we are going to be, forever would be like a prison for us, but it wouldn't be, a prison for reality if it was infinite, or the universe, because the universe wouldn't be aware that it was infinite, right? We would be aware if we had to live forever, which I don't want, but that's a whole separate can of tuna. August 16th, 12 to 2 p.m., live streaming from the Windsor Hip Hop Festival. Going to be an absolute blast. I cannot wait. I hope that you will join me. From then August 20th from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m., live streaming on Instagram. Make sure you follow me on Instagram. Instagram.com/square_and_compass_promotions. 21st, starting at 2 p.m., we're going to be doing a live stream for 24 hours, starting 2 p.m. August 21st, going 2 p.m. to August 22nd. I'm going to be showing off all of my different Masonic special items and regalia and just things I have that I really, really love and that are important to me, along with other topics. August 29th, on my personal YouTube channel, I'm going to be streaming with Smokey the Clown, which I cannot wait to do. I'm going to be mobile streaming with him. It's going to be an absolute blast. And that's my personal YouTube channel, youtube.com/Cameron Adamson. Other kind of announcements, I'm just going to give this announcement out quick. Please, please, please take care of yourself. If you're older, if you are taking certain medications, whatever it is, because we are still, at least in Windsor, going through a heat warning right now. Let me just see if I can find the date when it's supposed to end. A cooler air mass is expected, at least in Windsor, to arrive tonight, bringing an end to this heat event. So hopefully that means tonight we are going to be having some cooler temperatures, in Windsor at least. But either way, please, please, please take care of yourself. Drink water often and before you feel thirsty to replace fluids. Close blinds or shades, open windows if cooler than outside. Heat stroke is an emergency. Signs may include headache, nausea, dizziness, dark urine, thirst, intense fatigue. Stop activity and drink water. Determine if you and others around you are at greater risk of heat illness. Check on older adults, those living alone, and other at-risk people in person or on the phone multiple times a day. If you're a Freemason, call your Masonic brothers, see how they're doing. Nikai, I have no idea what any of that stuff means. A little bit maybe, but be careful with that. I'd say talk to your doctor. Wear lightweight, light color, loose-fitting clothing. Avoid wide-brimmed hat. Plan your activities during the coolest parts of the day. So all of that is happening. Then be careful for yourself. Heat waves. Just because I want to give a shout out, I got my library card renewed yesterday. I'm a big fan of the Windsor Public Library. If you get the chance, support it. Get yourself a library card. Check out your library. They are awesome, awesome resources in the community. And is there anything else I want to mention? I'm planning to do some more traveling in the fall, potentially overseas. Or even to South America. I don't know for sure, but I got my final set of vaccinations. I'm a big supporter of getting vaccinated when you travel, as well as just vaccinations in general. So, get yourself vaccinated. I think also, and this is just my opinion, this is not, many Freemasons, I gotta fly here, disagree with my opinion on this, but I think getting vaccinated is the Masonic thing to do, because it shows you care not just about yourself, but not getting others sick and not being a strain on the healthcare system. So those are just some announcements. Anything else? August 30th, we have a softball game happening. If you are a friend and you want to join, it's a Masonic softball game, but it's open to friends and family. So I hope you'll check it out. Something Mr. Keeps on Ticking is anti-vax. Get yourself vaccinated. Mr. Keeps on Ticking, you and I think, strongly disagree on that point. Island Freemasonry, sins of our Masonic forefathers. You know what really helped me along the way, though, Lapis? It's not, and this is something I actually, sorry, Lapis, do you follow me on Medium by any chance? Let me see if I can find it now. Just give me 1 second. Which is Medium is like a for written work. It's kind of like the YouTube for writing. We can, but don't forget, we're also just regular people. The issue is if I ever got into government and then tried to implement my policies and my ideas, that's when the rubber kind of hits the road, right? Good worship master borrows, great worshipful masters steal. So these are things that really helped me. I like my shirt too. It's really comfortable. And it's loose fitting and light colored, which you need to do when there's the heat. So what really helped me along the way is not so much particular Masonic books, but rather Masonic newsletters that you can get for free. They don't actually cost anything. which is incredible. But you're able to sign up online for so many newsletters from different like grand lodges and jurisdictions and districts that you can sign up for completely for free. Doesn't cost you anything, and it gives you the chance to learn about what is happening in Masonic, what is happening in Freemasonry outside of your particular jurisdiction, which is incredible. And that has helped me by giving me ideas on things I want to bring to my Masonic lodges, as well as, seeing what's going well in districts, what's going poorly in districts. It's helped me learn a lot. So I would recommend, if you get the chance, checking out, and you don't have to be a Mason. A lot of them, you don't need to be a Mason to sign up for. So if you're one of those people who's not a Mason, but you are curious about Freemasonry and you want to learn more about it, check out like the Masonic Charities Foundation newsletter, check out the Grand Lodge of Idaho's newsletter, check out the Ontario Mason newsletter, sign up for email blasts from Freemasonry for Dummies. Basically, if you go to Medium, Good Worship Masters Borrow, Great Worship Masters Steal, there is a list of resources, and you click on, with the links, part of it, and a whole list of resources that you can learn about. A whole bunch of resources when it comes to, like, again, that are being put out for free by Masonic jurisdictions. One of my favorites is Ontario Mason Magazine, which is available to anybody, and it's free. It gets right to your inbox. My dad sent me one from Manitoba, which is really great. Idaho has a great one. Masonic Charities Foundation has a great one. This Day in Masonic History is a great one, etc., etc. So Medium, Good Worship Master Burroughs, Great Worship Master Steele, that has really helped me signing up for all of those different newsletters. Are you saying you're against? No, I'm in favor of vaccines enforced by the government. I am in favor of vaccines enforced by the government, as a general rule. So, yeah. The nature of that enforcement can take on different forms, right? There is not a single type of force that you can implement as the government. The government has a lot of different levels, or levers, I should say, at which it can act. But it's, yeah, so it doesn't mean, jail or anything like that per se, but it does mean some type of, carrot and stick approach. Well, fair enough, but luckily I'm not in government, so you don't have to worry about it, at least not yet. Who knows? Maybe one day I'll take over. I'll need to get an army of people to help me out, which I don't really have right now. I could try to take over with my cat, Bandit, and I, but I don't know if my cat would be that interested in a government takeover. And Ben Franklin was a Mason, by the way. The question is, define tyrant, right? That's always going to be the question, right? I would say the biggest stumbling block is democracy. One of my big beliefs is in democracy, right? I believe that if I wanted to run for government, and I have in the past actually, ran for city council, volunteered for the Conservative Party for many years, was an intern. The key is you should, run for office, state your opinions, state your beliefs, and then leave it up to the people to decide if they want to vote you in or not. And if they do, you should be limited in how long you stay in office and have to appear before the people a second time and a third time and a fourth time, etc., and try to justify your decisions and justify your, why you made the choices that you made. And if the people don't like the choices, then there's a new government. But I think the key for Ben Franklin as an Enlightenment thinker was, the belief in democratic and democratic ideals and democracy. Thank you. There is thank you, Smokey. And that's why, even though I believe in government mandating vaccines, living in a democracy, it may not be possible because the Supreme Court may strike it down and say it's unconstitutional, depending on whether or not it passes the Oakes test, which is a whole other can of tuna, right? The Oakes test in the charter. But hey, you're quoting a Mason there. Voltaire had similar ideas. Condorcet had similar ideas. I think, though, what they would say is, if the leadership is democratically elected and has potential to be democratically revoked, then it would not be tyranny. So let me know, Smokey, do you think a infinite universe is possible? Yes or no? We've got yes is higher than no. So looks like Mr. Keeps on Ticking, your infinite regress argument is not carrying any weight. By the way, I'm very much looking forward, Smokey, to your our joint stream on August 29th. So maybe, I mean, the question is, would it pass the Oakes test, right? And that is, which is in our charter. When I went to law school, we learned about the Oakes test, right? The first part of our Constitution, which allows for the limitation of rights if it is in the interest of peace, order, and good governance. So, I mean, and there was a time, by the way, Mr. Keeps on Ticking, when government enforcement of vaccines would have been the conservative principle, at least based on my understanding of conservatism. Right? And the reason I can say that, do I still have them? Oh my God, I have to go through that whole thing. I can show you all my certificates from the Conservative Party, back under Prime Minister Stephen Harper. It would have been, I don't mean conservative as in like Conservative Party, I mean conservative as in small c, just conservative ideals, right? If you were to take conservatism to mean what I mean, which is a belief that it is the responsibility of the individual to contribute in whatever ways are necessary to make societies better and stronger, and to give up some individual freedoms and rights in order to focus on the team that is the country and the community and the world in making it a better place. Do you mean, Ryan, that the universe could be infinite through a black hole? Well, tyranny can exist in a democratic society, Rondo, but I think democracy, in the truest sense, significantly limits the extent to which tyranny can exist and can act, right? So, like, if you have a legitimate democracy where everybody gets a vote, and everybody gets a vote at, say, every 4 to 5 years, then and the vote is done fairly and legitimately and et cetera, and there's no shenanigans at the voting booth, then the most tyranny you can have would be, let's say 4 years, and then people would just vote him out. Now, if you have a tyrant that claims he lives and exists within a democracy, but does a bunch of shenanigans at the voting booth and doesn't let people vote or forces people to vote a certain way, then it's not a true democracy. And also, I'd say tyranny in a democracy is much harder, because another part of what makes a democracy is usually some type of separation of powers. So you have a judiciary that can fight back against an executive if the executive pushes too far towards tyrannical rule. You have a legislature that can try to set some type of laws that constrain an executive. There tends to be a process in place that makes tyranny very difficult. It's possible to have a democratic tyranny, but I would say it's incredibly challenging. And certainly over the long term. Again, maybe you can have a system where, in 4 years you vote in a person and that person acts like a tyrant, but so long as that person allows for another election and a fair election, which would be one of the definitions of democracy, I don't see how you could have a tyranny lasting a very long time. So I think that's the difference, Mr. Keeps on Ticking, between kind of your definition of conservatism and the way I would define conservatism, I would say your definition is more modern. Like, certainly in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, you look at, for example, um, like laws on, let's say, obscenity, for example. That was, um, that was done by conservatives, obscenity laws, as a way to protect um, society from the rights of individuals to say whatever they wanted and, impact the moral good of the community. Well, tyranny of the majority, um, like, that's I would say a what you have there is, it's not, how do I put this in a way that makes sense? It's not tyranny as an government system. It's tyranny within a democratic, like, how do I put this? So if you have a group of people, like you have, let's say, 60% of the population decides that they don't like 40% of the population. And so they are going to try to pass a whole bunch of laws to screw over the 40%. And they keep on electing their people into government, right? Then in a democracy, hopefully what you also have is a strong judiciary and a strong legislature that fights back against the executive, or at least the judiciary that says, no, there are certain rights that, the 60% doesn't get to take away. But you can have tyranny of the majorities. It's just harder because in my experience, almost always a tyrant, at least when I say my experience, my reading of government or history is usually, if you have a tyrant who is a tyrant against, a small percentage of the population, usually he becomes a tyrant against the entire population sooner or later. I mean, I appreciate that, Mr. Keeps on Ticking. I appreciate you being a patron for even a couple moments, right? That was very kind of you. So it's much, much appreciated, even if it was just a one-time thing. I appreciate it. If you keep sending me money and gifts, I'll not complain about that either. Right? Like, if you look at, for example, Nazi Germany, you had a tyranny there, but eventually, Hitler got rid of democratic elections, right? He could have kept them, and in theory, he probably might have won because he was popular for a time in Germany, but he chose not to because usually tyranny and democratic systems don't work well together. It's not impossible, right? It's absolutely not impossible. It's just very hard, which is why, by and large, tyrants tend not to maintain democratic systems. Because the power that a tyrant wields over the minority, sooner or later they want to wield it over the majority as well, at least in my historical reading. But yeah, Mr. Keeps on Ticking, I appreciate people supporting me however it is they do, even liking and subscribing. But I mean, cultural or informational tyranny, those are a thing as well, where again, the majority decides that they are going to enforce a certain set of rules on the minority. In a cultural sense, there's only a certain type of person that's shown on the cover of magazines, a certain race or ethnicity. There's only a certain type of person who is shown on television stations. There's only a certain type of person who gets to be a newscaster or whatever it might be. In the 1950s, it wasn't, there was no, people weren't voting on it. It's just everybody in a certain level of authority happened to be a certain race because there was a certain type of tyranny there. But I think tyranny as a governmental system, tyrants as being in charge of countries and governments, those tend to be very hard to coexist with democracy, as a general rule. And again, the extent to which tyranny is defined more broadly, like the tyranny of the masses, that gets a little bit more complicated, I would say. Um, but by the way, I don't think I said welcome Rondo, but welcome Rondo. I hope that you're doing well. All right, so I suppose, yes. Well, we can't talk about the galaxy, but I kept meaning to talk about Freemasonry and the Navy, Freemasonry and the Maritimes. By the way, Infinite Universe is still winning out at 62%. I have no idea what is in the Martian colonies, but I'm sure they're going to be great. I'm sure when Elon Musk creates our Martian colonies, it will be wonderful. So, right, the thing about Freemasonry, when it comes to Freemasonry and the Maritimes, Freemasonry, and the Navy, right, is there's a lot of interesting connections therein. Freemasonry, as having started in England or Scotland, but started in the United Kingdom, right? Oh, interesting. Well, there you go. I have not seen. I was a fan of Star Trek: The Next Generation. Never got into Star Trek: The OG series. Um, Interesting. I wonder what Picard would say about requiring vaccinations. Um, my suspicion is he would not be for it because there's an episode of Next Generation where he could have ordered Commander Worf to donate his blood to a Romulan and he chose not to. So, I wonder. So, you have in you have Freemasonry starting in the United Kingdom. You have Freemasonry starting in England in 1717, or Scotland a little bit earlier. Either way, it started in a country that was required, by virtue of it being an island, to be a seafaring country, a seafaring nation. So, Freemasonry kind of developed in a land that was already, by its nature, seafaring. And then, well, I don't know if it won. I'm not saying Picard made the right choice. I'm just saying that was the choice Picard made. Um, and then you also have to keep in mind that for Freemasonry to spread outside of England, like definitionally, it had to spread first on boats, right? No Freemason could spread Freemasonry to Europe, to the New World, to Africa, to anywhere, if at some point that Freemason did not find himself on a boat. In 2025 it might be different because obviously now I guess you could drive, under the English Channel to make it to France. That was not the case in 1717. So every Mason that chartered any lodge outside of the United Grand Lodge of England at one point or another set foot on a boat. So the Navy and, boats and the Maritimes were incredibly important in the history of the spread of Freemasonry. In fact, Freemasonry in Hong Kong and Macau were both also done on the backs of the Navy. Not so much the military naval, but rather trading, the East India Trading Company, right? It was created in Hong Kong and Macau as basically, or it traveled with both Portugal and Britain on ships that were not naval or military, but rather were trading vessels, the economics of trade. So Freemasonry, for better or worse, owes its expansion to sailors and to the Navy. Like I said, every single Grand Lodge or jurisdiction that was chartered out of the United Grand Lodge of England either received its membership or received its charter thanks to the Navy, thanks to sailors, and thanks to travel over water. I don't know what Pier Pass is, but that's really cool. Yeah. So one such example is the Navy Lodge number 2612 out of United Grand Lodge of England, and written about in the Square magazine. So this is a short history of Navy Lodge number 2612, written by David Swain. Admiral Sir Albert Hastings Markham, he was a prime inspiration behind the foundation of Navy Lodge. That is true. He was a member of Phoenix Lodge number 257, meeting in Portsmouth, and together with other naval brethren who were living and working in London, found it impossible to travel to and from the south coast to attend meetings. There were two other naval lodges in existence at the time. Royal Naval Lodge number 59, meeting in London, which had all but lost its naval connections, and Royal Navy Lodge number 429, meeting in Ramsgate, Kent, both still going strong. The consecration of the lodge was reported in the Times newspaper of June 13th, 1896. A new lodge of Freemasons was consecrated last night at Freemasons Hall, and the Prince of Wales declared it to be installed as its first worshipful master. The lodge has been established especially for the convenience of officers of the Royal Navy and Royal Marines and officials of the Admiralty. It bears the title of the Navy Lodge and is numbered 2612 on the roll of the Grand Lodge of England. The Master's chair was occupied initially by Right Worshipful Brother Edward Letchworth, Grand Secretary, who opened the lodge in the 3 degrees before the procession of the most worshipful of the Pro-Grand Master entered the lodge. The new lodge was duly consecrated in solemn form and according to ancient custom. HRH, the Prince of Wales, I could be a ruffian. Most Worshipful Grand Master, was proclaimed Worshipful Master of Navy Lodge, while quite fittingly Right Worshipful Brother Rear Admiral Albert H. Markham was installed as Worshipful Deputy Master by Right Worshipful Brother the Earl of Easton, assisted by the Viscount Dungarvan. Colonel William Campbell was appointed and invested as Senior Warden, and Rear Admiral W.H.C. St. Clair's Junior Warden. After the lodge was closed, the brother adjoined to the Freemasons' Tavern, the chair being taken by Worshipful Deputy Master, with 22 other Grand Officers and 34 of the 66 founding members being present. The first regular meeting of Navy Lodge was held less than 2 weeks later on June 25, 1896, when Admiral of the Fleet, Sir Henry Keppel, a founder, was elected honorary member at the ripe old age of 87. So, following in his grandfather's footsteps, HRH Prince Albert, later HM King George, was initiated into Navy Lodge by the Pro-Grand Master on December 2nd, 1919. He always instated that Freemasonry had been one of the strongest influences in his life. Response to the toast said, "I have always wished to become a Freemason, but owing to the war, I have had no opportunity before this of joining the craft. All my life, I've heard about Freemasonry, and though there has always been a certain mystery attached to it, I have learned that Freemasons in this country have been a great help to the poor and the friendless, and have been notable in their efforts on behalf of children. One can see by the great Masonic institutions and schools how successful their work has been in this cause, and I like to think that in the future I shall be associated with their great work." His elder brother, later King Edward VIII, was elected joining member on 5th of March 1920. Being a grandier, he had been initiated into the Household Brigade Lodge and was a member of several other lodges. At the time of his ascension to the throne, he was Worshipful Master of Friendship and Harmony Lodge number 1616 and continued to the end of this term. I believe this to be the only time a reigning monarch has ever been the presiding master of a lodge. He was a subsequently appointed past Grand Master. On December 11th, he abdicated the throne to marry American divorcee. He was driven to Portsmouth, etc., etc. Prince George, then Duke of Kent, was installed as Grand Master at a special meeting of Grand Lodge by his brother, now King George VI, famously of the King's Speech. So, probably one of the more famous naval officers, to be, I didn't recognize that reference, to be a Mason as well as a naval officer was Prince Philip. Born Prince of Greece and Denmark on the 10th of June 1921 at Villa Monrepo, the island of Corfu, he saw active service throughout the Second World War, and while serving in HMS Valiant during the Battle of Crete was mentioned in dispatches. On 9th of July 1947, his engagement to the Princess Elizabeth was announced, and the marriage took place in Westminster Abbey on 20th November that year. Shortly before the wedding, he was created Duke of Edinburgh, Earl of Maynooth, and Baron of Greenwich with the style of His Royal Highness, and appointed Knight of the Order of the Garter by King George VI. After the wedding, he continued his naval career. He was promoted to Lieutenant Commander on July 16, 1950, and given command of the frigate HMS Magpie. Commander Prince Philip was duly initiated into Navy Lodge on December 5th, 1952, at an emergency meeting in Freemasons Hall where no private guests were allowed. There were 52 lodge members present and just 12 official guests, including the most worshipful Grand Master, the Earl of Scarborough. Following a rather rapid promotion, the Admiral of the Fleet, Prince Philip, was passed on the 6th of March, raised on May 4th, 1953, with the Most Worshipful Grand Master and Most Worthy Grand Master of Scotland in attendance. 21 officers of Navy Lodge were joined by 69 members, 42 official guests, and 85 other guests. In order to mark the tercentenary of the Grand Lodge in 2017, the Lodge presented him with a solid gold jewel. The Duke received a small Navy Lodge party in his library at Buckingham Palace, comprising the Worshipful Master, the Secretary, and seniors and junior members. The date, 31st of May, the anniversary of the Battle of Jutland, once synonymous with so many Navy Lodge members, not the least of which his late father-in-law. Prince Philip passed away April 9th, 2021, just 2 months short of his 100th birthday. The Lodge proudly lists among his former members Baron Fraser of North Cape, Admiral Earl Jellicoe, Admiral Sir Henry Keppel, Sir Charles Royds, Sir Louis Gregg, and 3 winners of the Victoria Cross. Right, the Lodge celebrated its centenary, its 100-year anniversary, on June 14th, 1996, at an emergency meeting held in Lodge Room 10. The captain of this, Worshipful Brother Captain David M. Swan, enjoyed a naval career spanning nearly 34 years in the fleet and general service. He was initiated into Navy Lodge in 1989 and served as master while appointed to a NATO position in Virginia, USA, remaining a life member of Princess Anne Chapter 1607. So the captain was himself enjoyed a naval career, as did Prince Philip, married to Prince Elizabeth, who was a Freemason member of Naval Lodge, and who both served on the HMS Valiant during the Battle of Crete, and continued his naval career, Lieutenant Commander on July 16, 1950, given command of the frigate HMS Magpie. Other you had several special lodges were established to cater to naval personnel. We just talked about one of them. Notable naval officers who were Freemasons. Lord Nelson, he was Admiral Horatio Nelson, a British naval hero. He was likely, let me just get his information here. This is from Lodge of St. Patrick. Born in Burnham Thorpe, Norfolk, England, Horatio Nelson is famous for his service as a naval flag officer in the Royal Navy, particularly in the early part of the Napoleonic Wars. As a commander, Nelson was noted for his inspirational leadership, superb understanding of strategy, and unconventional tactics, which resulted in a number of decisive victories at sea. He was injured in battle at several times, losing an arm and the sight in one eye. Of his numerous victories, the best known and most noble is the 1805 Battle of Trafalgar, where his warships crushed a combined French and Spanish fleet. At the apogee of the action, he was shot and mortally wounded by a sniper from the mizzen mast of the French warship Redoutable. An exceptionally brave man, Nelson fought in an American War of Independence, the French Revolutionary Wars, with distinction at the Battle of Cape Vincent and the Battle of Santa Cruz de Tenerife, where he lost his right arm. Unbowed, he returned to the fray, sinking the French fleet at the Battle of the Nile, thus trapping General Napoleon's army in Egypt. According to the researchers, Nelson had by this time already been initiated into Freemasonry, though there is difference of opinion as to which lodge he'd actually joined. John Hamill, head of special projects at UGLE, favors Amphibious Lodge number 407 in Plymouth. Amphibious, a good Masonic term there. While Hammond Lestrange's research points to York Lodge number 236. It is known that Brother Nelson at least visited Plymouth Lodge at the behest of his friend Freemason H.R.H. Prince William in 1787. In 1801, Nelson was dispatched. That's wonderful, E.A. Courtney. I'm very happy about that. In 1807, Nelson dispatched the Baltic and won another victory, this time over the Danes at the Battle of Copenhagen. Napoleon Bonaparte had been threatening to invade Britain since 1798, ordering that hundreds of landing barges be constructed for the purpose, but he also required naval control over the English Channel. In 1805, Nelson took over the blockade of Cadiz, where finally, on 21st October 1805, the Franco-Spanish fleet came unwillingly out of port to be engaged by the Royal Navy off Cape Trafalgar. The Allied enemy fleet was wrecked, and with it sank any lingering hopes Napoleon may have harbored regarding a successful invasion of England. The battle was Britain's greatest naval victory, but bought at a cost of Nelson's life. His body was brought back to England, where he was accorded a state funeral. Nelson's death at, not a Masonic funeral, looks like just state. Nelson's death at Trafalgar secured his position as one of Britain's most heroic figures. Numerous documents, including the iconic Nelson's column in Trafalgar Square in London, has been created in his honor, and his legacy remains highly influential. An extraordinary achievement for a sailor who frequently suffered from chronic seasickness. I did not know that. For many years, it had been thought that Lord Nelson was possibly not associated with Freemasonry, but painstaking research by John Hamill of UGLE revealed he was. At a meeting held at the original Amphibious Lodge of 407 in Stonehouse, Plymouth, on the 15th of August, a lodge for Royal Navy officers and Marines, hence Amphibious Lodge. Among the visitors listed is Brother Nelson, who had arrived back in Portsmouth, England from Nevis in the Caribbean on the 4th of July, 1787, aboard the HMS Boreas. The Boreas paid off at Sheerness, West Yorkshire on 30th November 1787. Nevis is important as it was the island on which the young sea captain, Horatio Nelson, met and married his first wife. It is also known that in 1787, Nelson was invited to Plymouth by H.R.H. Prince William, famous Freemason, to witness a stone-laying ceremonies with members of Amphibious Lodge, again a lodge for naval officers, in attendance. Prince William had been made a Mason in Plymouth on the 9th March in 1786. A writer in the Freemasons Quarterly in 1839 claimed Nelson and his servant Tom Allen were Freemasons, but gave no evidence to support the claim. So that is one example of a Freemason and a naval officer. Another, John Paul Jones, a leading, I don't know if he's actually counted, I believe he is counted as a father of our founding father. Certainly, he was one of the most important figures in the American Revolutionary War. Frogs are naval creatures or maritime creatures. Brother John Paul Jones was a leading naval figure of the American Revolution, and today is considered the father of the American Navy. Born in the Abergend estate in Kirkland, Scotland, as John Paul, he became a member of St. Bernard's Masonic Lodge, number 122, Kirk de Bright, Scotland, and was raised Master Mason on November 27th, 1770. John Paul left school at the age of 12 and 13, became an apprentice local shipper. He worked aboard a series of commercial ships, finally earning his own command. While serving as the captain of the vessel Betsy in 1773, Jones was confronted by several mutinous crew members. Jones killed one of the crewmen in what appeared to be an act of self-defense. The incident took place in the waters off the British-held island of Tobago. Warned that authorities on the island planned to arrest and put him on trial, Jones fled to America, making his way to Philadelphia. It's at this point he's said to have added Jones to his name. In 1775, he offered his services to Continental Congress and was assigned as first lieutenant aboard Alfred, the first ship commissioned in the fledgling Continental Navy. His performance in the early stages of the Revolutionary War led to Jones being given command of the Providence. Shortly after, he was named commander of a squadron that included his former ship, the Alfred. Interestingly enough, you could argue that he was not really a naval man in the sense of, he was not so much Navy in the sense of military, but rather a buccaneer, which is a state-sponsored pirate. So you could argue that he was more pirate than naval officer. But, when you're a state-sponsored pirate, it kind of counts as, buccaneer is the term. Thank you, Tony. I appreciate it. On June of 1717, by the way, Oliver Cromwell, it's unknown. I think there's speculation. I don't believe he was, but I believe people speculate as to whether he was or not. Buccaneers, right? On June of 1717, the Continental Congress ordered John Paul Jones to Portsmouth, New Hampshire, to oversee the completion and take command of the newly built 18-gun sloop of war Ranger. Jones was said to have visited St. John's Lodge No. 1 during his stay in Portsmouth. In November, he set sail for France. After conferring with American commissioners in Paris, which included fellow Mason Ben Franklin, Jones began a series of coastal and commercial raids against the British Isles. Although these raids did little actual damage, the hope was the embarrassment caused by the British government would force the Royal Navy to bring some of its fleet stationed in America back to England to better protect British home waters. During one of these raids, the Ranger engaged the British warship HMS Drake in the Irish Sea. In an hour-long battle, the Ranger defeated and captured the Drake, making the first time during the Revolution a British warship was captured by Americans. Upon returning to France, Jones was promised command of a new and larger vessel. After some time, he finally received orders to take command of an aging French commercial vessel that had been converted to 42-gun warship. Jones gave the ship the name Bonhomme Richard in honor of Benjamin Franklin. Bonhomme, good man Richard, in honor of Ben Franklin. I'm not sure. Was Benjamin's first name Richard? I got to check that. In August of 1779, Jones departed France in command of the 5-ship squadron. All the ships in Jones' squadron, with the exception of the Bonhomme Richard, engaged the Countess of Scarborough, etc., etc. Basically, he managed to win that battle. With the war officially ending in 1783, Jones, along with the Continental Navy officers, found himself discharged and faced an uncertain future. He accepted a commission as Admiral of the Navy of the Russian Empress Catherine the Great, whose antiquated and poorly led fleet was desperate need of modernization. He also led Russian Black Sea Fleet against the Turkish Navy. Although successful, Jones was constantly being undermined by officers who resented a foreigner holding such high position in the Russian Navy. He was relieved of his command and moved back to France. 2 years later, he died alone in his Paris apartment. At the time of his death, Jones was near penniless, and friends, some who were said to be Masons, raised money for his burial in French Protestant cemetery reserved for foreigners. You can be very successful, but that doesn't mean you'll do well at the end of your life necessarily. But that is John Paul Jones, another naval Freemason. Sir John Franklin. Thanks, Dad, for being here. He was another Freemason and naval officer. He was, let me just find the information about his lodge. He was lost in the Arctic, if I recall correctly. He was born April 16th, 1786, passed away 11th of June, 1847. He was a naval officer and explorer. He entered the British Navy in October 1800 at the age of 14. Over the course of his career, rose to the rank of captain and led 3 Arctic expeditions, one to the mouth of the Mackenzie River. In 1830, he became captain of HMS Rainbow, stationed in the eastern Mediterranean, and accepted appointment as lieutenant governor of the convict colony Van Diemen's Land. He was back in England in June of 1844. Welcome Harry, his last Arctic expedition with 129 officers and men sailed from England on May 19, 1845, never to be seen again. The ship's log records Franklin's death on June 11, 1847. In 2014, the wreck of the Erebus was discovered in the Queen Maud Gulf. 2 years later, the Terror was found near the west coast. The statement that Franklin was a Freemason was often repeated in the popular press in the 1850s. Oh, it looks like it was actually debunked. But a purple glass Masonic seal was among the relics recovered and preserved at the National Maritime Museum. So there was, at least on his boat, a glass Masonic seal. So I'm sure the owner of it did not want to end up in the Arctic, but that's a whole other can of tuna, whether or not, he was a Mason or somebody on his boat was a Mason. But it's nice to know at least one Masonic piece of artifact made its way to the Arctic. I don't know of any others off the top of my head. We talked about him before, but His Royal Highness, the Duke of Edinburgh, married to Queen Elizabeth, was himself a Freemason. He started his life in Freemasonry in 1952 at the age of 31. He was initiated into Navy Lodge number 2612 on December 5th, 1952. On March 6, 1953, he progressed to the 2nd degree and was advanced to the 3rd degree on May 4th, 1953. His naval career the Duke of Edinburgh, Prince Philip, had a rich and varied career in the Royal Navy. The most valuable items for Masons, it's the brain. It's what's up here. It's not an actual item itself. It's what you got in your mind. The Duke of Edinburgh had a rich and varied career in the Royal Navy. He had a deep passion for naval history and seafaring ever since he left Gordonstown in 1939 and joined the Royal Navy as a cadet. He completed his initial training at the Royal Naval College in Dartmouth, where he was awarded the King's Dirk and a prize as the best cadet of his entry. He's seen below, fifth from left, front row. That's just a picture. In 1940, he joined the battleship HMS Ramillies in Colombo, Sri Lanka, as a midshipman and spent the following 6 months in the Indian Ocean. In January 1941, he joined the battleship HMS Valiant in Alexandria, Egypt. During the night action off Cape Matapan, he was in charge of the ship's searchlight control, for which he was mentioned in dispatches. Having qualified for a promotion to sub-lieutenant, he returned to the United Kingdom and, after taking a series of technical courses, was appointed to the destroyer HMS Wallace, based at the Rosyth for the convoy escort duties on the East Coast. Promoted to rank of lieutenant on July 16, 1942. In October that year, appointed first lieutenant, second in command of Wallace at the unusually young age of 21. In July 1943, took part in Allied landings on Sicily. After further courses, appointed first lieutenant of the new fleet destroyer HMS Whelp, built on the Tyne. After instructing the Petty Officer School and attending the Naval Staff College, Prince Philip, now the Duke of Edinburgh, was appointed First Lieutenant HMS Checkers, 1949, stationed in Malta, where he was joined by Princess Elizabeth. Checkers was the leader of the first destroyer of the flotilla of the Mediterranean Fleet. Promoted to lieutenant commander in 1950 and then appointed in command of the frigate HMS Magpie. The appointment came to an end in 1951. In 1952, he was promoted to commander, but his naval career came to the death of his father-in-law, King George VI. In 1943, the Queen appointed the Duke of Edinburgh Admiral of the Fleet and Captain General Marines. So he was a Freemason while he was the Duke of Edinburgh Admiral of the Fleet and Captain General Royal Marines. Not surprisingly, His Royal Highness had a lifelong affection for boats and the sea and a keen interest in maritime history. He was on board Brunel's SS Great Britain, a steamship which Prince Albert had seen launched, and when it was returned to Bristol from the Falkland Islands in the 1970s. The Duke of Edinburgh had many patronages related to his maritime interests. In 1948, His Royal Highness became the trustee of the National Maritime Museum and remained patron until his death. He was also the elder brother and then master of the Corporation of Trinity House, president of the Maritime Trust, and patron of the HMS Trincomalee Trust. His Royal Highness took a close interest in the Cutty Sark in Greenwich throughout his life and was co-founder of the Cutty Sark Preservation Society in 1952. He visited the ship during its restoration following a fire in 2007 and again to mark the Queen's Diamond Jubilee in 2012 and formally reopened the newly restored ship. So another Freemason who was a naval officer and had a keen interest in the Navy. Welcome, Harry Bacharach. Thank you for joining. Well, Freemasons sometimes get it wrong as well. What can I say? The Earth is a sphere. What proof? If I'm watching a boat sail away from me, I see the bottom disappear first, then I see the top disappear. The reason for that is because it's going over a curve, and which means the bottom disappears before the top. Also, the fact that every other planet is a sphere. Even if a telescope, I see the bottom disappear first, then the top. But why would a telescope make a difference? Either way, you're seeing the bottom disappear first, right? So, all right. According to the Encyclopedia Masonica, naval lodges, right? Because of crowded spaces in ships and because of frequent changes of personnel, early attempts to constitute lodges on board war vessels did not meet with large success. Even at the period when Thomas Duncurley, master organizer and himself a member of Naval Lodge on the HMS Vanguard, put his enthusiasm behind this, uh, um, put his enthusiasm behind them. In his lodge list, Lane names only 4 British naval lodges. Between 1760 and 1768, the modern Grand Lodge chartered 3. In 1810, after a conference called by the Grand Lodge of Scotland, the British Grand Lodges agreed not to authorize naval warrants. Men in the Navy, Marines on sea duty, and seamen in general found their Masonic homes in lodges working in the ports, many of which were naval or mariners' lodges in effect. Masonic students had to be on guard against confusing a Masonic meeting on board a ship, called by Masons in its group passengers list, or military lodge on board a transport, which chartered naval lodges. There are a number of instances where Masonic burial services have been solemnized on board a ship. In one instance, where a retiring missionary died on board a ship, a group of Masons wirelessed to Washington for permission to bring the body home for burial, and 3 of them accompanied the body and the widow to her home in the Midwest. So, that is interesting. I know of many examples of cruise ships, naval ships, whatever it might be, putting space on a boat on the ship aside in order to allow for a Masonic meeting to take place amongst any members who may be themselves officers or otherwise on board. But obviously it's challenging because how do you, where is the charter? You have frequent changes of personnel. So there are no lodges that exist exclusively, at least to my knowledge, on board any type of boats or ships. That is true, Lapis. Well, so that's a very good question, Rondo. On a cruise ship, it's not an issue, obviously. On a maritime ship, or on a naval ship, I should say, I don't know. My assumption would be no, because if he is a POW, presumably he is being held in captivity somewhere. So my assumption would be no. But anything's possible, maybe. I would assume no, though. There have been examples in military history of military officers recognizing a fellow Mason and either, not executing him upon his request or letting him go free. But on a boat, it's a little bit harder to let a POW go free because there's nowhere for him to go on a boat, right? You're kind of stuck there. So I don't know if you could do the same thing. If he's on land, he can in theory return home, return to his army. Or find safe passage somewhere. On a boat, it's a little bit harder. But I suppose, if you look at Masonic Shop even, it has a list of seafaring Masons. Seafaring man who appears on one of the degrees, that's Mariner Masons. That is from Scottish Rite. There is a Scottish Rite degree which looks at the idea of certain, and even in the 3rd degree in some jurisdictions, certain troublesome folks relying on seafaring escape, and there's a captain actually included in one of the degrees. Not in all ritual. That's more a Preston Webb thing. Well, if they were a POW in on a pirate ship, let's say one that is not fighting for any particular country per se, then you may have what's we're looking for. You may have the ability to take part in some meetings. I feel like pirates would probably be less, or buccaneers might be less concerned about those type of things per se. It is always easy, lapis, to make flat earthers angry and push them over the edge, I suppose. That's a very funny play on words. But if you look here, so the brethren among the saltwater lodges in cities along the coast, these were the sea brothers, mariner masons. Our brethren in lodges in ships, the famous and far-going seamen of the craft day in the days of sail. I'm a child, so whenever I write or hear the word seaman, I smirk because I'm 2 years old at heart. A reader, or like a child at heart, and anything, when I hear the word seaman, I giggle. A reader of the minutes of these lodges attempted to believe that every Jack Tar in Britain must have been a Mason. Thus, Sir Francis Columbine, the Right Worshipful Master of Royal Naval Lodge at Bapping, is credited with having raised 600 American captains and 400 British naval officers in 20 years. Old Dundee, its neighbor lodge, had 267 sea members, a special classification in 1810. The great Thomas Duncurley, the largest figure in the first days of the Grand Chapter of the Grand Encampment, was made a Mason in the latter in 1761 and found there 26 others who, like himself, he was in the Navy, were sea members. These seafaring brothers of Britain, along with other thousands from America, Canada, Europe, and the West Indies, carried the craft into almost every port in the world, and often were the first to plant its newly opened countries, as in South Africa, New Zealand, Hawaii, China, Hong Kong, India, Egypt. Right? Couldn't any brother explain why the historians of Masonry have failed to give a chapter to them? They were missionaries, they were army and naval lodges of Freemasonry as a universal, a worldwide brotherhood. Many of the rumors, whispers, traditions of Masonry in America long before 1730 became understandable if it is remembered how many Masons, sea captains were coming into the ports of Boston, Providence, New York, Philadelphia, and Norfolk. So what are some of the things I'm trying to, so many, right? So many, but it's not because they were Masons per se, although there is rumors that Blackbeard was a Mason. Rather, it's like, why does every pen look the same? Why does every hammer look the same? There are certain kind of principles of organization that if you are, worth your salt, you're going to pay attention to in Freemasonry. Or when you're organizing, when you're organizing any group, there are certain types of principles that just make sense, and you're going to kind of follow those. At least you should. So, I guess, what am I trying to say about this? Freemasonry, depending what you want to believe, but for our purposes, we're going to say Freemasonry, or at least the Premier Grand Lodge of England, was founded in 1717. At a time when, by necessity, the spread of Freemasonry outside of England required partnerships or required maritime and the Navy. It required boats. You were not going to be able to spread Freemasonry from the Premier Grand Lodge of England throughout Europe, throughout anywhere, without spending some time on a boat, throughout North America, without spending some time on a boat. So Freemasonry, and especially the spread of Freemasonry, is inherently and undeniably linked to naval traffic and maritime traffic. In the early years of the spread of Freemasonry, where these boats first landed, ports, Boston, Providence, New York, Hong Kong, South Africa, all of these different ports, which were populated by both military bases as well as tradesmen, found themselves having Freemasonry within its presence. Freemasons would travel there on boats and remain there and form Masonic lodges. Or soldiers would travel there, who were also Freemasons, would travel there and set up Masonic lodges on military bases at these ports. And then as they moved inland, the Masonic lodges would follow the military bases as they went. So first, you cannot separate the spread of Freemasonry from the usage of maritime travel and boats. And that's true because of the date, right? Now in 2025, if Freemasonry were to form today, I suppose you could use airplanes, cars, whatever it is to spread Freemasonry. You did not have the chance to do so back in the day. So because many Masonic lodges initially formed in port towns and port cities, a consequence of that was early on many Freemasons were somewhat connected to the Navy or the Maritimes. They were either naval officers or they worked on commercial ships, or potentially they were buccaneers or privates. Right? Thus, Sir Francis Columbine, many years the Right Worshipful Master of the Royal Naval Lodge of Bapping, credited with having raised 600 American captains, 400 British naval officers in 20 years. Its neighbor lodge had 267 sea members. The great Thomas Dunkerley, the largest figure in the first days of the Grand Chapter, was made a Mason in 1761, and 26 others were sea members or naval members. As a consequence of this, throughout history, many naval officers or Freemasons have been intricately connected to the Maritimes or the Navy. John Paul Jones, the first admiral of the United States Navy, was a Freemason. Prince Philip, who was had a very illustrious naval career, aside from his career in the royal family, was a member of Naval Lodge number 2612. Horatio Nelson, the famous British sea captain who defeated Napoleon, was involved in a Masonic stone-laying ceremony and was a Freemason himself. Sir Francis Columbine, Master of Royal Naval Lodge, initiated a large number of Masons therein. Sir John Franklin, who led 3 expeditions to the Arctic and was a naval officer, is rumored to have been a Freemason. However, on his boat, we know for a fact that there was a Masonic artifact therein contained. Whether it was his or another officer's, we are not sure. Yes, seamen, it always makes me laugh, Rondo, because I'm an immature child at heart. What can I say? I hope you enjoyed McDonald's, Priscilla, and thank you for being here. Horval, thank you for being here. Tyrone, thank you for being here. I hope you'll all take a moment to hit the like and subscribe button, right? Naval lodges were common in port cities. I've said a million times, and this is true. Freemasonry primarily spread 3 ways. It spread through the military, it spread through trade and the economy, and it spread through education. If you want to put it another way, though, since the military to travel and since the economic trade to travel were both dependent on maritime shipping, maritime travel, and the Navy, you could really argue Freemasonry expanded through the Maritimes first and foremost, through maritime travel first and foremost, and then later on extended other ways, right? Because even if it was expanding through the Navy, even if it was expanding through military bases, the military were at first traveling to their location through boats and through the Navy, transporting them there, right? And traders were at first traveling through ships to trade their goods and their wares. Eventually, you started to see Freemasonry following the expansion of America to the west through the railroad, through the gold rush, which was not nearly as dependent on the Maritimes, obviously, but that came later. So naval lodges, the Maritimes, were vitally important to Freemasonry early in its career, early in its expansion. And that's why you saw so many naval lodges, port lodges, and naval or maritime or seamen as Freemasons. Freemasonry has obviously moved away from a dependence on the Maritimes. However, there are still examples of Freemasonry, trying to take advantage of the sea or the Maritimes in various ways. There is a Masonic Yacht Club. Also, I don't know if it's happening next year, but in 2025 and previous years, there was a Masonic cruise where a Masonic jurisdiction organized a cruise for members, friends, and family. You signed up as a Mason, and you took part in Masonic events while on the cruise. There have been, cruise ships that have organized, special times and locations on the cruise ships for Masons to meet and engage in Masonic meetings. That was out on my dad's cruise ships, for example. And so there is those connections as well. There were attempts to actually create like a chartered Masonic lodge aboard boats and ships. The problem is, first, how do you charter it? Which Grand Lodge jurisdiction does it belong to, since it's always traveling? I suppose where the boat is registered and pays taxes, that's where you would register the lodge, I assume. But also, the other thing to keep in mind is you have massive turnover of personnel and people on board these boats. So, if the worshipful master of the boat is reassigned or gets off at a port, what happens to the lodge, right? So it was never really successful, although there have been many Masonic meetings on boats. And there's currently a Masonic Yacht Club, which it's an organization comprised of Masons and immediate family members. Let me see if I can find the information about it. In the spring of 1958, a group of nautical-minded Masons gathered together and established a Masonic boat club. The first Commodore was Walter Price, and their meetings were held at Hotel Astor. From this very small beginning, our membership has grown to include members from as far away as St. Thomas. Since its inception, all Masons are welcome to attend and bring their wives and friends. All of the club's businesses and finances are taken care of by the officers and board of governors and then submitted to the membership for approval. This system made the meeting very pleasant, not only for the Masons, but for the ladies as well. On September 20, 1958, Commodore Walter Prince led the first sea-going trip. More than 12 boats, all commanded by Masonic skippers, sailed from the Hudson River through the Rockaways to Sandy Hook. The seas were rough, but all arrived safely and on time with their distinguished guests. The Masonic Yacht Club was formed that spring. Mason sailors who formed a club coming together with families and friends and their ladies. You did not have to have a boat or be a skipper to become a member. The worship brother Carl Turjug wrote their communications. Under the fellowship program, there is an active club known as the Masonic Yacht Club, whose incorporation has been approved by the Grand Lodge of New York. We were granted a charter, and since then we have many rendezvous throughout the New York and Long Island areas. Today we have the addition of several dedicated services of the members' ladies, and as the First Mates Club, offer support and help where needed. There's a little cool photo gallery as well if you type in Masonic Yacht Club. I hope that gives you guys at least some ideas of Freemasonry and the Maritimes, Freemasonry and nautical information. Thank you, Priscilla, for being here. Eminem is a good rapper. I agree. I hope that you're doing well. Let me know if you have any questions, thoughts, ideas. I'd love to try to answer them when it comes to Freemasonry. I hope you enjoyed that very quick little discussion therein. hope you don't mind the sound of the cars passing outside. A 3-hour tour of what? What would be the 3-hour tour? Thank you, Gareth. By the way, Gareth, how are you doing? I hope you're doing well. I hope you'll jump in the chat and say hello and let me know how it's going. The minnow, right? I've never seen. This is going to sound pretty terrible. I've never seen an episode of Gilligan's Island. I know I'm terrible, so I know almost nothing about Gilligan's Island. Oh, I guess it does, right? Because, yeah, they all went off on some, like, trip together, and next thing you know, they end up on some island. Didn't they make, like, a coconut radio or something? If they made a coconut radio, couldn't they just escape? I don't get why they couldn't find a way to escape. If they can make a radio, they can make a boat, you know. If you can make a radio, you can make a boat. But, I mean, I suppose the answer is obvious, right? The reason that they couldn't get off the island is because they had to have a television show. So, you know, it's hard to do a television show if your guys get off the island too quickly. That was a nice arm crack. If they had Freemasons on there, we could have built them a whole... well, I can't build anything. If they had stonemasons on there, they could have built a whole house. They would have been fine. But that's a whole other can of tuna. That's a whole other can of tuna also. So I hope everybody is doing well. Jump in the chat. Let me know if you have any thoughts on Freemasonry, positive, negative, or neutral. Also, because I have my 24-hour live stream coming up, let me know if you have anything you want to hear me discuss when it comes to Freemasonry. Like, what do you want to see me discuss on my 24-hour live stream? It totally does. Call me Ishmael. Actually, I wonder... I wonder if there's any Freemasonry and Moby Dick connections. Actually, Southern California Research Lodge, Moby Dick, and Freemasonry. So certainly it was a whaling town, and that in and of itself, you know, the idea of the whaling town, a port town, Freemasonry is very common in port towns back in the day. The writer proceeds to cite similarities between the world of whaling and Masonic order and points out the existence of our lodges in noting fishing communities. The Mason trying to find sincere Masonic meaning in... Da, da, da. Yeah, it looks like there was some connections between Freemasonry and Herman Melville, but mostly it was just the idea of it being a whaling town, a port town. Freemasonry was so popular in port towns, so... I don't know. I mean, how? Yeah, I mean, they've made a few movies of it, some really great movies of it. Um, of Moby Dick, some ones I've really enjoyed. So, remember Patrick Stewart, Captain Picard was, played Captain Ahab once, and I really liked that movie. And just the idea of you're on the ocean and there's this giant whale that's attacking you, and just recognizing the power and the size of it, and the power and size of nature. I think it makes a really cool. It makes a really cool kind of image. What year was that? I have no idea. Let's look it up. I'm curious now. Patrick Stewart is not a Freemason, I believe, but I'm going to double check because I'm curious. Curious what Google has to say before I even check anything else. Well, he was number one in the leader of the Springfield chapter of the Stonecutters, so there's that. That's his connection to Freemasonry. He was the leader of the Stonecutters. So let's see, what year did that movie come up? No, apparently not, according to Google. And I've never heard anything that he is, so... I'm trying to find his filmography. Or if I can maybe find it this way. He starred as Captain Ahab in the USA miniseries Moby Dick in 1998. Ebenezer Scrooge in A Christmas Carol 1999. Well, he's a knight, but Freemasons are not knights. I wish we were. It'd be really, really cool. What's OBE? I'm trying to recognize that. Order of the British. I don't think. Is there? I don't think there's a connection between the two necessarily. Order of British Empire. I mean, I'm sure a lot of Freemasons have been Order of the British Empire members. Deeply intertwined, yeah. I'm sure there are many who are connected, but it's not in and of itself the same. Final Destination Bloodlines. I liked Final Destination Bloodlines a lot. I thought it was great. I was really, really impressed by it. So yeah, I love horror movies. We all know my favorite thing is scary movies, outside of talking about Freemasonry, including in this case talking about Freemasonry and the Navy. And there is also, I didn't mention, but there is also in Freemasonry some nautical references. A captain makes an appearance in one of our rituals. I'm not going to talk about it too much more than that, other than to say there is a connection there between Freemasonry and the sea in that sense of a certain captain who appears in some of our rituals. Depending on what jurisdiction you're in and whether they use emulation or not, it can kind of change. But that is kind of cool as well. All right, we're going to give it a bit more time. Basically, we're back to the hanging out stage. So if anybody wants to jump in the chat, well, I don't know how much you saw. I don't know if you saw any of my discussions on Freemasonry and the Maritimes, Freemasonry and naval officers, what Freemasonry owes to the Navy. Good for you for being in the doctor's office, as you should be. I'm a big believer that Freemasons, and not just Freemasons, but everybody should take care of their health. So, I mean, visiting the doctor is never fun. Having said that, I am sure that you will have a great visit. I hope you do. I hope you're doing okay. But yeah, I think it behooves us and is incumbent on everybody to care for our health. Hence the, me always blathering on about the importance of mindfulness, vaccines, eating right, working out. And by the way, I am not the best at any of those things, especially the eating right part. I'm the worst at that. But I try my best. And I'm hoping to keep getting better. Good. I'm glad it's not life-threatening, but I am still sorry it's messed up. Hopefully your doctor can help you get better. And at least it's not life-threatening. I'm happy about that. Marco Perez, how are you doing? I hope you're doing well. Thank you for being here. Don't forget to hit that like button if you get the chance. And let me know how you're doing. We were talking earlier about Freemasonry and the Maritimes, or Navy, or what Freemasonry owes to the water, to the Navy, to the Maritimes. Developing on a land in a sea-locked, developing on an island, it was basically inherently or of necessity needed to have a greater amount of reliance on maritime shipping, the Navy, to kind of spread throughout the world. Not in an evangelical sense. It wasn't trying to spread that way. It's just, if you were a Mason, but you also happen to be a trader on, with the East India Company, you needed to rely on a boat to trade your goods and services, and in the process, you may set up shop, let's say in Hong Kong, and, other Masons may find you there, and then you've got a Masonic Lodge in Hong Kong, which I would 1,000,000% love to visit, by the way. That's on my list, too, is to get the chance to visit a Masonic Lodge in Hong Kong. Maybe I'll get the chance. Who knows? We're just going to give it a little bit more time. We're going to see who else joins. I will be back on 1 a.m. stream tonight. It's going to be a much Like I said, the 1 a.m. streams are much more relaxed. Tomorrow, I haven't decided for sure what my topic is going to be. If anybody has any suggestions of things they want me to talk about, I'll see if I can't fit something in to discuss. But yeah, let me know if you have any topics that you want to see me discuss tomorrow. Anything happening in the news, things of that nature. Thank you. I mean, obviously, Freemasonry in Texas is not as reliant on maritime history, certainly not your lodge, although Texas has got its ports, right? Texas has got its ports as well. Funny Republican is back. Welcome back, Funny Republican. I hope you're doing well. I hope you'll take a moment to hit that like and subscribe button. I think you're already subscribed. Hit the like button. We're just hanging out, chatting, seeing who jumps in the chat. Yeah, your ports would be like what, in the Houston area, right? Along the Gulf of Mexico. You know, but my suspicion is Freemasonry came to Texas first, primarily during the westward expansion, or through Mexico, as opposed to coming in by the ocean. Or Louisiana, actually, in this case, yeah. So westward expansion. The oldest Masonic lodge in Texas is Holland Lodge Number 1 AF&AM, chartered by the Grand Lodge of Louisiana in 1836. It's older than Texas itself. But it would have came through land, I would assume. As the ports for Texas. Let's see. If I can. Yeah, but like I said, there would be. It's not the same as like people from England in 1717 needing to travel somewhere else, right? So. Yeah, looks like the two biggest ports are Galveston, Corpus Christi. Lake Jackson, South Padre Island. I think that might be. Where does Mexico start? And then in Mexico, though, obviously, Freemasonry came first along the ports with the Spanish. West Texas, East Texas, it's all beautiful. So, like I said, I hope to make it back to Texas sooner or later. It'll be one of my main goals. Please take a moment, if you're just joining us, hit that like and subscribe button. I hope you enjoyed the discussion on Freemasonry and the Maritimes or Navy. And yeah, I hope everybody is doing well. By the way, to any Freemasons, this is something I may talk about. To any Freemasons in New Brunswick, we have, or New York, where are the Maritimes? Newfoundland, excuse me. Basically, to any Masons in the Maritimes who may be facing loss of home, need to evacuate, whatever it might be, due to the forest fires, thoughts are with you. If there are any Masonic relief efforts in these areas, as there often are, please let us know. Maybe put it down in the chat. I will do my best to try to share that information. I know it's tough because there's so many different causes that people can and should donate to. It makes it really, really tough. But like I said, I hope that you guys will maybe find the ability to help some brothers out who may need it in the Maritimes. Is an infinite universe possible? 65% yes, 35% no. I would agree with that. So many of the founding fathers, founding members, founding pick your term in Texas were themselves Freemasons. So, yeah, I think I would agree with that. There would not be a Texas without Freemasonry. There might not be an America without Freemasonry, at least as we understand it, right? That's kind of the key. I think these things would still exist, but the principles upon which they were founded would be significantly different, I think. Oh. I've been talking a lot about Freemasonry and the economy. According to BNN Bloomberg, U.S. inflation unchanged last month, though core prices accelerated. What's going on, Christopher? So, tariffs pushed the prices of imported goods higher while gas and grocery prices cool. Consumer prices rose 2.7% in July. I would love to lead you into the future. If you want to help me do that, Christopher, please sign up for my Patreon. Patreon.com/square-and-compass. That's a good way to help lead us into the future. Put down the information there as to where to find it. Mr. Keeps on Ticking. That's a question. I should make that a poll question. I'll see if anyone wants to answer it. I'm probably going to be jumping off this stream shortly. I've gone for 2.5 hours so far. Maybe I'll go for another half hour. We'll see. I mean, you would have to define what you mean by the West. What it means to fall. I mean, I personally, again, speaking for myself, think Donald Trump represents the fall of the West. Certainly, I think he represents the fall of Western values. If by Western values you mean democracy, reason, kindness, empathy, welcoming the other, inclusivity, inclusion, respect for the rule of law, respect for process. So I would consider, so I think in some ways, Mr. Keeps on Ticking, both you and I would agree, we just see the fall coming from different places. I see the fall of the West being caused by Donald Trump and Donald Trump's supporters. I don't see any effort on his part to save it. He seems to be the person who, not just him, but him and his supporters seem to be the person who desires to bring it down. It is my hope that Freemasonry can be a push against that by championing Western values like democracy, like tolerance, like empathy, like kindness, all of those things that I think made the West what the West is, like not just rule of law, but a respect for the process by which the rule of law is enforced. And I hope that in some ways Freemasonry can continue to represent those values in what I see as going to be some very challenging few years ahead. But we'll make it through. People have the ability to survive um, a lot of different things, and I think one way or another we'll make it through what is going to be some very challenging times. I think, well, I don't know. I think Mr. Keeps on Ticking, you support somebody who is taking the West down. I think you support him um, because you don't believe he is, which is fine. Nobody votes against their own interests or what they, well, people can vote against their own interests, but nobody knowingly votes against their own interests. But I think the person you support is taking the West down. But I know many Freemasons who strongly disagree with me, and I know many Freemasons who are actually supportive of Donald Trump. I don't get how or why, but um, that's a whole other thing. But I remember once visiting a Masonic lodge where the secretary had a little mini Donald Trump on his desk, which I was not a fan of, because in Freemasonry, one of the rules is you're not to talk politics or religion in lodge. I suppose in his mind, he's not talking about it. He's just putting up his, Donald Trump figurine. But yeah, I think Donald Trump, not just Donald Trump, but Trump, Hegseth, Vance, they are they are putting a lot of time and effort into the destruction of Western liberal values, as understood by George Washington, Diderot, Condorcet, Ben Franklin, Voltaire, and replacing them with something much darker and much scarier. What's happening underground, Thomas? I suspect if Jesus were to come back today, he would not be able to make it into the United States. That's for sure. As an immigrant, I think he would be kicked out. Vance is Catholic. That is true. He does not represent Catholicism as I've understood it based on some of the Catholics I've met, both within and without Freemasonry. Some of the nuns I've known, for example. But he is a Catholic, so there's that. Underground Thomas, what is happening? Well, that's the thing, EA Freemason. Stagnant wages. That's why I often discuss, and this applies to Knights of Columbus as well, as, many other groups, I believe. Like, the extent to which the West is suffering, there's a lot of different reasons. Part of those reasons are going to be economic uncertainty leading to fear and anger within different communities, also leading to a retreat from public life, a desire to focus more on personal security as opposed to any type of communal good. So I'm concerned, my wages are going down, and therefore, I'm going to spend more time working, more time trying to get mine. I'm not going to have this sense of civic responsibility. I'm going to, invest in Bitcoin or put out this crypto stuff, which I'm not completely opposed to Bitcoin. It seems like a decent idea. It's just, it seems to have become kind of another stomping ground for nihilism in terms of like, well, you can't trust the federal government, so we're going to trust Bitcoin. Like, the whole thing seems like, as economic challenges increase, Western liberal values suffer, and I would say Freemasonry is a descendant of some of those values. So Freemasonry suffers as well. I think you are right, Underground Thomas. I think that is a big issue. Alonzo, what I'd say is it's interpretations, right? Like with Mr. Keeps on Ticking, my assumption is he is more on maybe the Vance interpretation of Catholicism, let's say, than others I have met, who I would say act in a manner that is very different to Vance, or at least act in a manner that is very different to the Vance administration or the Trump administration. But again, this is one of those things where every kind of person, forget about just Freemason, every person has their own opinion. I certainly have my opinions, which again do not reflect all of Freemasonry, or do not reflect every different Mason's belief. It's funny because for the longest time, in like the 18th century, Freemasonry was generally understood to be like a more left-wing organization, right? It tended to champion democracy, human rights, civic rights, and civil rights in countries where there was either tyranny or dictatorships or some combination thereof. Whereas in the 50s, Freemasonry tended to be viewed more right-wing. 50s, 60s tended to be viewed as almost keepers of a status quo in the States. And then recently, it seems that there seems to be a perception anyways of it being somewhat more left-wing, although actually in Masonic lodges, again, we can never discuss politics. So the extent to which that is the case, I'm not really sure. I think that might be more perception than reality. Okay, well, there you go. My suspicion, though, Mr. Keeps on Ticking, is everybody probably feels that way. It's a bit like with Freemasonry, right? Everybody feels like they have the right interpretation of Freemasonry. I believe I have the right interpretation of Freemasonry. Others would disagree. So, like the vaccine issue, for example, I believe that one of our Masonic teachings would be, Freemasonry doesn't talk about vaccinations at all, one way or the other. All those rituals came along before vaccinations was a thing. But I believe that if you look at Masonic ideas, Masonic ritual, the implication is getting vaccinated is the Masonic thing to do. But I know many Masons who strongly disagree with me on that and say the interpretation is such that getting vaccinated is a personal choice and not a Masonic, not a Masonic, I don't know what the word is not encouraged or discouraged by Masonic ideals. And some think getting vaccinated is discouraged by Masonic interpretations. So everybody, so my suspicion is, I believe that, you practice Catholicism, in a way that is in line with doctrine and social teachings of Catholic Church. But I suspect there may be other interpretations of Catholicism that perhaps have different views on what is doctrine and social teachings. We're pretty good at it. It's getting tougher and tougher, Underground Thomas, because of social media. So you may go to a Masonic Lodge meeting, there be no discussion of politics, which there shouldn't be. But then you go home, you go onto your X, your Blue Sky, your Facebook, your whatever it is, and the person you sat in lodge with is now posting a bunch of stuff about whatever. He loves Trump, he hates Trump. He loves Biden, he hates Biden, whatever it is he's posting. And suddenly, you have two Masons arguing in the comment section of a Facebook post about the proper political views. And unfortunately, that has in the past spilled over into lodges where people have said, well, I'm not going to go to lodge if so-and-so is there because he posted something, critical of Donald Trump, and I'm a supporter of Donald Trump. That stuff has happened in the past. With politics, it's much more 24/7. You're always online. Somebody's always talking politics, and that creates problems. And I think it's a shame when that happens. And I always try to be very clear when I'm talking on here that I'm talking exclusively for myself. And also, when I'm talking about Masonic interpretations, I try to be clear about the same thing, right? So, for example, if I'm giving a fact, like the Premier Grand Lodge of England was formed June 24th, 1717, that's just a fact, right? When I'm talking about my views on vaccinations and why I think Freemasonry encourages people getting vaccinated, or getting vaccinated is a Masonic thing to do. I want to be clear that's not a fact. That's my interpretation of Freemasonry. Right, in the same way, Mr. Keeps on Ticking exists in a manner that is completely faithful with Catholicism, doctrines and teachings. I like to think I fall in line with what could be considered Freemasonic ideals, but because we don't really have teachings in the sense, it's more like Masonic ideals. But whether we do or not, whether I do or not, is kind of up to interpretation. It is disheartening. I mean, I do get really concerned that we are witnessing the fall of the West. Part of that fall is the fact that politics is so ubiquitous in our lives. It makes it hard for us to focus and grow in other ways we may have to. If that makes, again, any sense. We're just going to give it a bit more time. I think the better question is, to even the poll question is, can Freemasonry stop the fall of the West, quote unquote? And I believe it can. I believe as Freemasonry were to grow, or if it were to grow in our communities, you would see a return of liberal Western values, which I think would be a very good thing. It's certainly not because not a fan of the idea of the word invasion there. I mean, I think that's a little bit unkind to immigrants seeking a better life. I don't think it's all Trump. It's a lot of different factors. It's never all or nothing. All or nothing statements tend to be pretty, I find, unhelpful in almost every facet of life. One of my favorite quotes, I don't know if you've seen the movie Bug, Mr. Keeps on Ticking, but there's this great scene where there's basically this crazy person who's trying to convince somebody else that there's a bunch of bugs in her apartment. And he says, do you have bugs in your apartment? And the woman says, maybe. And, the guy says, maybe doesn't exist. The sign says, because it's in a motel, the sign says vacancy or no vacancy. It doesn't say possibility of vacancy, right? When people say all or nothing, it's yes or no. I'm not a fan of that. So obviously it's not all Trump. There's a lot of factors that go into these challenges. I think if anything, Trump in some ways was a response by people to what they were seeing. I just think the response is worse than it's one of those, the cure is worse than the disease. Hiring Trump to solve the problem is like hiring an arsonist to be your fireman, is how I might describe it. And I agree with Underground Thomas. There needs to be a way to dampen the inarticulable rage that is simmering in about everyone. I hope Freemasonry can be one of those ways, for everybody, left, right, liberal, conservative, whatever it might be. Can you at least agree? Well, I mean, I would not agree with the idea of being invaded by hordes of barbarians. I'm not comfortable calling anybody a barbarian, nor am I comfortable with using the term invasion. If you want to argue that, a massive, an increase in immigration rates have resulted in issues around, for example, there's suddenly less housing availability, which has jacked up prices for housing. Sure. I mean, things like that, do become an issue. But like I'm just not a fan of this trying to other people in this way. Like, I don't know. Like yesterday, I was, or the day before, whatever day it was, I was wheeling back from the doctor's myself, actually, um, and I passed by this playground, right? And I mean, it looked like primarily newer Canadians or immigrants in the playground, a lot of hijabs and burqas and stuff, but they were all, pushing their kids on the swings. The kids were running around. Um, Despite the different clothing and skin color, it didn't look any different than, at least the feeling I got was the same as the feeling I got when I was a kid, and go with all my friends and parents to the park, and we'd all be playing around. So, like, they didn't look like invaders to me. They looked like people who were just trying to find a better life and who are my neighbors. Um, so yeah, I don't know. I mean, uh, it seems kind of unnecessarily cruel to define these things as the invasion of barbarian hordes. That's not to say I'm not one of those people who believes in completely open borders. I'm fine with better processes in terms of getting in. I think we needed to, flood the border with, in the States, they should have flooded the border with way more judges and people to hear these cases, and not necessarily, I think Remain in Mexico was a pretty decent strategy, which was to my knowledge, it was a Trump strategy that I liked, that Biden continued. But, you know, in the same way I like Trump because of the vaccine stuff, Operation Warp Speed. So I'm not saying Trump did everything bad. I think he did more bad than good, though. That's for sure. I wouldn't lionize immigrants. I mean, my dad is an immigrant, and my great grandparents were immigrants. I don't lionize immigrants. I just would, neither would I dismiss them, right? That's somewhat true as well, Underground Thomas. We have done some of that stuff in the past. I don't think that they would. I've known enough immigrants that at least that has not been my experience, right? And it's tough because it's kind of like the Masonic idea of I'm a Freemason for years, I'm meeting all these Masons, I'm meeting 33-degree Masons, and all these conspiracy folks are telling me Freemasonry is evil and asking me to ignore what I've been seeing day to day. It's like I'm meeting immigrants, I don't know what every day, but fairly regularly. I'm working with them, I worked with them. I'm not seeing this desire for theocracy and a desire to these treatments that are that incompatible with Western values. But yet you're asking me to believe that's the case, which doesn't seem fair to the people I've met or have treated me well, or to even immigrants like my father. Um, so I've heard that as a rumor, Alonzo. I don't think that is the case. The rumor, from what I understand, goes that, yes, get yourself to the doctor. Do what you're supposed to do. There was the idea that the Knights Templar, when fleeing from King Philip, I think it was, in 1307, or I forget what day, I'm getting the dates all mixed up. The basic idea is the Knights Templar, when fleeing from King Philip in France, took refuge aboard pirate ships and Templar ships, and the skull and the crossbones became their symbol to be recognized as they were fleeing persecution. I've not heard a lot of proof of that, at least that's my knowledge, although some Freemasons do include the square and compass and crossbones. They'll include a skull and a crossbones as part of their square and compasses, or as part of their lodge symbol. I think they do that because they think it looks cool. I mean, the destabilizing environment doesn't help. I just think characterizing these things as an invasion, as whatever it is, it's unnecessarily cruel and unkind, and it others people in a way that obviously there has to be a limit in terms of the number of people you bring forward. I think. I don't know if you can just bring everybody who wants to be into a country, numbers wise. But I think, you know, that's a good question, Underground Thomas. What I would just say is, I think sometimes when I hear a lot of this anti-immigrant sentiment, the reason I don't like it, welcome Dylan, is it seems like it's very limiting. Like, so I'm going to use, just stay with me for 1 second. I'm getting back to my point. So, hundreds of airplanes. So one of my favorite TV shows is The West Wing, and there's this episode called 100,000 Airplanes, and there's this great quote by Sam Seaborn, who is one of the characters in The West Wing, one of the best characters from the first 3 seasons, and season 4 as well a little bit. He says, anyways, in 1940, our armed forces weren't Challenger. Well, I don't want to take over the world, nor do Masons. So I think Masonic principles and values can help make the world a better place, but we do not want to take over the world. But he said, in 1940, our armed forces weren't among the 12 most formidable in the world. But obviously, we were going into a big war. And Roosevelt said the U.S. would produce 50,000 airplanes in the next 4 years. Everyone thought it was a joke. And it was. Because it turned out we produced 100,000 airplanes. Gave the Air Force an armada that would block the sun. America and Canada can do some pretty amazing things when it puts its mind to it. And when I hear people implying that we cannot take in a lot of immigrants, or immigrant values are incompatible with the West, or you'll hear about a small town having a large immigrant population and issues in terms of providing services and language barriers. It's a very defeating quality. To me, what makes America so great is its capacity to do incredible things. To produce 100,000 airplanes when it thought it could only produce 50, to make it to the moon and beat the Russians there, and to welcome, accommodate, and allow for immigrants from all over the world to, be part of the greatest country in the world, or the second greatest country in the world. The greatest country is Canada, right? And so, it's when I hear especially conservatives, but even sometimes liberals, but conservatives talk about this idea of like, communities can't handle all these immigrants, or our southern border can't handle this influx of immigrants, so therefore just shut it down. It's like America couldn't build 50,000 airplanes, it built 100,000 airplanes. America couldn't make it to the moon, it made it to the moon. America couldn't do this, it did this. America could never elect a black president, it elected a black president. America could never pass the Civil Rights Act, it passed the Civil Rights Act. Like, America can do some pretty incredible things, and all of the anti-immigrant, it's not just anti-immigrant, it's anti-American, in the sense that it's implying there's something that Freemasonry, or something that America, cannot do. And I don't think that's the case. I think America absolutely can create a system that both welcomes more immigrants and does so in a way that is safe as possible, not 100% safe, nothing is, secure as possible, and strengthens Western values, in my opinion. So if you could build 100,000 planes at a time when the thought was you couldn't build any. Um, you can create towns that are welcoming of immigrants and you know uh, 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 and still extol Western values. I mean, yes, I agree. EA Freemason, and again, though, like to anybody on the stream, Challenger. I don't know if you um, um, if you Challenger Dylan, if you view are a fan of Trump or whatever it is, that's fine. I personally am not, but I know many Masons who are, for better or worse, right? This is my stream talk about Freemasonry, but also we talk about my views on Freemasonry, how my views on Freemasonry inform my understanding of the world. Um, well, I mean, yeah, The West Wing, 100,000 Airplanes, great episode. Challenger, let me know what you mean by by why you think the Rothschilds will be punished. What you mean by that? How do you envision a Masonic revival in rural areas? It's going to be tough because now you're dealing again with economic challenges. You're dealing with the fact that you have lodges that, no longer, that you have depressed economic towns where people are leaving. If they're leaving, what type of economic base do you have to grow a Masonic Lodge? I think the first thing you need to see in those rural areas is an increase in, you need to see either a growth in the economy, or you need to see lodges accepting the fact that they are forever going to be at the smaller end of smaller towns and create a symbiotic relationship with whatever local businesses exist and relevance therein. So contacting local businesses and trying to create deals for catering at events, growing the economy that way. Freemasonry can, in some ways, I think, grow your economies. What is the Mark Fisher's idea of ontology? And Dylan, I hope that you're doing well. Thank you for being here. Interesting. Follow the West. Yes, 56%. No, 44%. I agree. It's interesting that, I mean, I'm happy that, I thought we get more yeses, to be honest. I'm happy that we don't have as many yeses as I thought we would. Maybe there is some room for optimism somewhere. Who knows? But I do have to leave in about 3 minutes. I will be back at 1. I want to thank everybody for being here. As always, we're going to have a 1 a.m. stream, which is going to be a relaxing stream. I may talk a bit about 10,000, 100,000 airplanes actually tomorrow. One of my favorite episodes of The West Wing. But if anybody does have anything else they want to add, please let me know. I have to grab some food, do some other stuff. It's going to be a fun time. I get that, Underground Thomas. Having said that, I mean, there were some great things in the past, too. Like, we should use the past to inspire us, I think, and not view it as kind of a haunting, right? We want to use the past to inspire ourselves while not being so beholden to it that we're not able to appreciate better futures or different futures. Right? I think it's a tough balance to fit, but I think it's important that we do so. By the way, Underground Thomas, are you a member of our of my Patreon? Patreon.com/squareandcompass. If not, I hope you'll become a member. I could use this support, and you can join for free. It doesn't cost anything. Yes, thank you so much. There's some truth to that, Underground Thomas. Thank you. Here, let me give you the Patreon. You can join for free, or you can pay a couple bucks a month. You get some special items. Either way is fine with me. Patreon.com/square and compass. And welcome. If you're just joining us, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. We are talking about Freemasonry. I was talking about Freemasonry and the Navy, Freemasonry in the Maritimes. I'm going to be putting some poll questions up. I hope you guys will answer those. And yeah, I hope that you will let me know anything you always want to chat about for the next couple minutes. Patreon.com/square and compass. I'm just giving it a couple more minutes. There's lots of people watching, so I'm just curious if we're going to see any new things popping up or any new questions. So I want to give it a couple minutes. I don't know if Thomas has been, gone to the Patreon, but just going to see if anybody jumps in the chat. Give it maybe 2 more minutes. And I will be, like I said, back on tonight at 1 a.m. Yes, the 1 a.m. I'll be there. That's my plan anyways. The third temple, is he referring to Jerusalem? I mean, I'm no fan of Donald Trump myself. But the extent to which he will or will not build a third temple, I have no clue. Thank you, Harry. I hope that you are doing well also. And I hope that you enjoy your day as well. Don't forget, you guys can support me on Patreon. You can support me by, somebody kindly sent me one of our fine guest sent me some coffee, which was absolutely appreciated. You can do it that way as well, or you can PayPal me. PayPal info@squareandcompass.ca. I'm just giving, because we saw some people watching, so I'm curious if we're going to get some more people jumping on the chat to say hello. So let's give it a couple minutes, just to see if somebody decides to jump on. I do have to get to some work at some point. I still get some food. I am starving. All right. I think I'm going to call this stream off right now, but find me again 1 a.m. Thank you guys so much. I hope you guys have a great day.